Well, I just want to we'll kind of get this slow rolling. We're still waiting for see if Joel is going to pop in, but for now it's the six of us and a party. So thank you for taking the time out on a Saturday to come hang out with us here at Lightbox Expo Online. I really appreciate it. I am Jim Dewanakos. I am the co-founder and convention director of Lightbox Expo, and just wanted to say thanks for being here. And I want to introduce. I'll do a couple of quick introductions for everyone. Actually, do you guys want to do your own, or should I just narrate this from the best I can do? Hi, Joel.
Hey, Joel. Hi.
All right.
I think we're covering every corner of the globe almost here, right?
Really?
Well, no, we don't have any. Jen, where are you?
Minneapolis.
Oh, okay. We're covering every part of the state. So how about that? In UK.
Although we do have from our looking at our attendee chat, like we do have someone from Finland, so that's
okay.
Good distance. So so yeah, so I guess we'll just we'll get rolling as people are just piling in, and I'll just see if do you guys want to do your own intros? Is that all right?
Yeah.
All right, I'll just start for my screen. Looks like Stefan is first, so I'll start with Stefan.
Should I go, or are you going? I'm sorry. Do you want me to?
Yeah, I can do it. You can. How about I'll do it? You correct me.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. So, so Stefan is an animator, writer, director. He worked and a comic book creator, of course, which is why we're all here. He was a supervising animator on the Iron Giant, and his current work you can see right now on Disney Plus. He was the supervising animator on Marvel Studios' What If? Relevant to our conversation, he's self-published a number of comics, including Silver, Rosalind, and you kickstarted Palomino, is that correct? That was
yes, just at the start of the pandemic, and we're into volume 2 now, but the first one we kickstarted already, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for being here. Next up, we have, we'll go with Lisa, whose pen name is Tula Lote. She's an illustrator who specializes in comics, film, and editorial illustration, and also is the founder and director of the world famous Thought Bubble Festival in the UK. Hello. All right, next up is Sanford Green. Sanford is a comic illustrator, co-creator, and artist for the Eisner and Ringo award-winning Bitter Root, which is published by Image Comics. It was recently slated to be turned into a film directed by Regina King, and has been drawing comics for a very long time, since he was 6 years old. It was
too long. It probably says that on the Wikipedia. Like he was 6 years old when he started. So,
it's funny you say that. Just a couple of days ago, or yesterday, Jim Lee posted his illustration, the original art he did for that X-Men, the famous 5 gatefold cover. Right. And he's like, this was 30 years ago. And it's like, oh man, nothing makes me feel old. And you're like, wow. Anyway.
Nothing makes you feel older than Jim Lee posts. When he posts stuff, I usually feel old. I got his artist edition, and looking through that artist edition, I just started getting older and older. Each page I just started feeling like, yeah, this is, I was in high school when that stuff was out, and
yeah, it's crazy.
It's all Jim Lee's doing that we're old right now.
Damn it, Jim Lee. All right, so next up we have Jen Bartel, who is an illustrator and comic artist, best known for her ongoing covers with and work with Marvel and Disney. Has collaborated and created, I picked this, so it was like, has collaborated and created shoes with Adidas, Foot Locker, and K-Swiss, because I'm a big shoe person, so there you go. She's also the co-creator and artist of Blackbird, published by Image Comics. So thank you. Welcome, Jen. Next up is Bill Pressing. Hello, Bill.
Hello.
Bill is a story supervisor at Pixar. Most recently has worked on Soul and is the head and story of the upcoming Turning Red, which is directed by Domi Shi. He also just released his new graphic novel, Lucky Boy, available for purchase now at Stuart Ang Books, one of the places that takes a lot of my money all the time.
Yeah, it's almost out.
Is it?
It got delayed. It's out in France.
Oh,
but it's open for pre-order.
Well, so there we go. Okay, well, thank you. Yeah,
sorry to correct.
There's been so many printing delays. Like,
there are.
Crazy. Last but not least, of course, is Joelle Jones. Thank you for joining us. Joelle's a comic creator, illustrator, and writer, currently writing Wonder Girl for DC Comics, and previously that had worked on Batman. Also wrote and drew the series, creator-owned series Lady Killer. So thank you for joining us, Joelle.
Thanks for having me.
So hello. We just wanted to kick off this panel, so Lightbox Expo is all about, it has kind of two missions. One is education, and the other is really pointing a spotlight on the people who make the pop culture that we all get to consume. And so often it doesn't have the spotlight on the creators that I think should be deserved for people who are actually making all the things that, especially in these days of the pandemic, we are sitting around and enjoying television and movies and, comic books, of course. And a lot of people don't know the faces behind who is making their entertainment. And so that's one of the big reasons that we do these kind of panels, is not only to talk about the art and, like what kind of creative freedom that comics allow for everybody as a medium, but also what are the people who do it like. And so we wanted to give a little spotlight on everyone. So I'm going to start backwards since we ended with Joelle. I'm going to start with you. You want to tell us a little bit about, so how did you start in comics, and then when did you decide that you wanted to get into writing and creating your own stuff instead of just illustrating?
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of a roundabout way to get there. I never really wanted to write anything and never had any goals set out to do that. I think basically what happened is I dropped out of college, showed my portfolio to a few people, and then got my first job, and I kept getting jobs, but they were the same kind of jobs over and over again. And I just wasn't getting the work that I wanted to do on books that I would actually read. So I thought nobody's going to give me that job, so I have to just sort of make it up.
That's awesome. I think that's a really common theme, is that you have to create the space that you want to occupy. And a lot of times even more so maybe, is that you're not allowed, or you're not given the opportunity to go into those spaces that you are interested in. And so by creating it yourself, you can sort of just say that this is my thing. So that's awesome. I'll use that to go over to Stefan. So Stefan, you recently wrote and drew your own book. You've done it quite a bit, but this is the first one that you kickstarted. So what made you decide to take your kind of self-publishing and put it on the web, especially at the time of the pandemic?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I've had this kind of double life my entire life, because my parents had this comic book store, basically, where, so, I was reading all the stuff, the French comics, the American comics. But at the same time, they also had they were selling like Super 8 film of, like the Disney movies, the Jungle Book and stuff like that. I always kind of wanted to do two things. And to me, and all that stuff, the magazine, the writing, the books, it was always one thing. I never saw it as different things. But of course, the industry works, differently. And so, went to school for animation. And so when I went to, and that was the year that Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out. And for I'm dating myself, but for those who are old enough to remember, that's the movie that changed everything for animation. And so all of a sudden it went from like a dying art form to like the stuff of blockbusters. So that opened the door to like a really, fun career, and which, animation was always my passion. But then about 10 years ago, I was like, but remember, you also wanted to do the other thing, because the thing with animation, as Bill knows, and it's a lot of other people's money that's at play and stuff like that. And it's a group effort, which is wonderful because you learn from a lot of people, but your contribution is, always, and sometimes I would get to write, sometimes we get to draw, but never at the same time, never all of it, and so I was like, oh, you know what? And so that's when I decided to do comics again with Silver, which was the first series. The first impulse was just to go to publishers, and then I would, get notes from them like, yeah, but you should do it this way, should do it that way. And I'm like, all those notes were like, so it's easier for us to sell the movie. And I'm like, don't worry about that stuff, because actually that's my day job. So let's just, stay on the creative, and so then I realized that, it's like the old joke, like how to make $1 million in 2 easy steps. Step one, find $1 million. And I thought it was the same for publishing, which is that how to publish a book in 2 easy steps. First, have a book, So I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to just dive into the book. I'm not going to worry about anything. And once I had the book, then it turns out that from my parents having a store, like just like the, conventions were like a great open space to break in. And so it kind of, I'm sorry, I know we're all of people, so I don't want to speak too long, but so I got like basically took over my life. And for the last 10 years, it became more and more comics, until like the What If thing, where suddenly when I wasn't ready to go, like, yeah, maybe I don't need to do this anymore because they're not making in animation the kind of stuff I want to make anyway. That's when so that brought me back also. So now I'm back more into the double thing of it. But the point is that I just love the autonomy of it. That's why I started Dark Planet, which was my imprint as a publisher. And that was wonderful, because the truth is, until the pandemic, really, between the conventions and the direct market, which it's not hard to break into the direct market in terms of there's no real gatekeepers. As soon as Diamond said, okay, we'll put your books on the truck, then it's up to you to market it and stuff. So it's all doable. And we did it and it worked out. And so now with the pandemic, and with everything, and also the fact that I don't think I've said it publicly before, but Silver is in development at Netflix. So there's really a need for me to kind of focus more on the creative, and so we just made a deal this year with Abrams Comics Art, which I love the people there, and hopefully they're taking over the publishing of it. So I'm in this kind of weird transition period where it's going from like we're doing everything mom and pop, to like maybe some of it, people who actually know what they're doing, I'll let them do it. It's going to be great. So, sorry, that's like the long short of it.
No problem. Thanks, Stefan. No, that's really interesting. I mean, of course, again, this is one of the things we're talking about is how you're allowed the creative freedom. And like you said, you were able to take Silver and publish it exactly how you wanted it. And like you said, the movie stuff and all that is secondary, but it's become so primary for people when they're talking that they're not looking at a story as, the story that you want to tell. It's like, oh, how can I mold this into a vision of something I think I can sell? So, yeah. And
I don't think you can be cynical about that stuff too. You just have to do something you 100% believe in and you're artistically committed to. And then if it's interesting to you, then guess what? It's going to be interesting to other people. But trying to game it from the start, they won't do that.
Yeah. You can always tell when it's a book that's like, oh, there's just my movie pitch. It's not, there's no heart in you. And it's a funny way to kind of like look at a book, but reading so many after all these years, you can just kind of tell as you're reading something. It doesn't feel like it's the creators putting their heart and soul into it. So speaking of creator own, Jen, let's talk a little bit about, so you started doing a lot of, before comics, you were doing a ton of other illustration work, and then you transitioned into comics, starting with covers mostly, and then you decided to do a creator owned book. So how's your journey into the comic book world?
Yeah, so actually, I wasn't doing a ton of work before comics because I had graduated with my illustration degree from a reputable art school at the height of the Great Recession. And so there were no jobs. And so I kind of just spun my wheels for like 6 years. And I did like little fiddly, freelance jobs here and there, but never really found my footing. And basically what had happened was in 2015, after working like service industry and retail jobs for like basically since I graduated, I had kind of just come to terms with the fact that I wasn't going to have a freelance career. And that was when I gave myself permission to just draw for fun again, instead of trying to like make a portfolio that would get me hired. And so, yeah, I just started doing art that made me happy. And a lot of that happened to be like comic book oriented stuff and superheroes. And I think it just kind of organically made it onto the radar of a couple editors. And that was when I actually started freelancing for real. So I think even when they were hiring me, they thought that I had like prior work experience, but I really kind of didn't. So yeah, I guess I fell into it on accident. But I think my takeaway from it has been like, when you make work that feels authentic and like it's coming from a place of like genuine, how you genuinely feel about things. I think people can identify with that. And I think that's ultimately what got me noticed. And from there, I just sort of kept saying yes and kept turning work in, and the jobs haven't stopped. So that's where I'm at.
That's awesome. And again, like I think it's a recurring theme here is the creating the things that you want to create and using that opportunity to then, or using those things to then find other opportunities that you didn't even know you wanted, and having people offer you things that you're like, oh yeah, that sounds great, let's do that. Or
that's basically been my entire career. Yeah, it's like all of the stuff that I've done over the last like 4 years or so, I never imagined I'd be doing. And yeah, even like doing comics, like doing interior work, I never imagined that's something I would do, because it's not something that I was like formally trained in, or I just didn't feel like I guess had like the experience to do it. But when they throw you in the deep end, it's like sink or swim. And so yeah, that's basically, it's just been me trying to stay afloat this whole time.
It's like it's the ultimate fake it till you make it.
Yep.
All right, so Sanford, you have been illustrating books for a few years, and just recently kind of gotten into doing a few. You've done some creator-owned in the past, but is mostly, of course, a lot of work for major publishers. So, what was your start, and how did you get into the industry?
It was a cold night in the year. Okay, I won't do the year, but it was a cold night. I know that for sure. My mom took me to a Kmart when those things existed, and it had a spinner rack. I see you have a spinner rack there. Nice. I got the monster back here, man. And saw this thing, and it just blew me away, because it was like everything that I saw on television was on the spinner rack, as far as like these characters and the world, the worlds that I saw on TV. So I was already enamored by the fact that here is this stuff, these visuals right here at my fingertips. Went and hung out at the spinner rack. My mom saw that I was interested, and it was off to the races. So I took the books home, started drawing from the comics, because you couldn't necessarily get a lot from looking at a cartoon. Pausing was driving me crazy, trying to pause a cartoon to draw it, right? It's just, it was a losing battle. I tried it though, but was unsuccessful. But getting these comics, started, to collect more of them. X-Men, of course, the Jim Lee stuff. And that's when I was like, okay, I think I want to do this. I want to draw this. What really got me, honestly, Some of you guys might remember the Rob Liefeld commercial. Jim, I know you know about it. Rob Liefeld had a Levi's commercial with Spike Lee. So Spike Lee was like an art hero of mine, even at a young age, seeing movies like Do the Right Thing and some of his earlier works. So I recognized him initially before I even knew who Rob was. But then I saw that Rob was a comic book artist. Now, wait a minute, I'm seeing something that I'm familiar with, and I wasn't quite sure of how to describe it, but I knew it was something. I knew there was some kind of opportunity somewhere to draw comics, or there's a profession somewhere. Then I saw this commercial. Once I saw that commercial, I was like, yeah, this right here, it does exist. You can draw and you can be famous and hang out with Spike Lee. So that was my goal, to draw and become famous and hang out with Spike Lee, or get to meet him at some point. It took about 20 years for that to happen, but it eventually got to that point. But yeah, that's pretty much where it started. And I graduated from high school, went to college, did graphic design for a while, and then slowly started going into the comic book conventions. And that's when I started showing my portfolio and getting, my portfolio ready. I'm learning all the things I needed to know, because I took art school, but art school was more about traditional classic illustration, which I'm glad I took. But it set me up for a foundation to learn how to navigate in different fields, whether it be children's books or comics or what have you. So that's pretty much how it started, man. And I've been doing this thing now for 20 years now. And as far as the creator-owned stuff, I think 2016 is where we started to feel like we had an opportunity to branch out and do something a little different. And then 2018 happened. This little independent film called Black Panther came out, and it made some money. And we saw just that was the window. It was like, okay, we have to do something now, because after Black Panther, what else is there, in terms of on that scale? So we felt that there was a need to try to fill that gap, because there was a gap, a huge gap, actually. We went to Image, and long story short, we pitched our book to Image. Before we can get the pitch out, they were like, yes, please. We not only want it, we kind of need it. And I'm like, okay, now we're off to the races. So, we've been very fortunate and lucky, blessed even, to have what we have right now in our series. And, I'm very grateful that we took the plunge, because it was kind of a safe zone being at Marvel at the time. But man, I'm, very grateful that we did it, because it has opened a lot of opportunities, not only for ourselves, but for other creators as well.
That's awesome. That's so glad to hear. Yeah. I mean, and Image has always been great about trying to find different types of books. It's when you can't pigeonhole what they publish, which has always been something very cool. Is it's not a superhero publisher, it's not just horror, it's like a little bit of everything lives there and finds its way out into the world, which is pretty awesome. So congrats, that's awesome. All right, so Lisa, let's talk about you for a moment. Hello. Thanks for joining us all the way from the UK. I know it's a little on the later side, but thanks for making the time. So you're known for almost, exclusively for just kind of cover and poster illustration that you get to do. Which came first for you? Like, how did you sort of fall into doing covers, or, because if I'm not mistaken, you've actually never done any interior, or any long interior work, sequential storytelling. Is that correct?
Kind of. I did 6 issues with Warren Ellis for Supreme Blue Rose. That was with Image. But that's the most I've done. Everything else has been kind of one-off issues. There was a Scarlet Witch and Zero. And then little pieces in anthologies, like some Vertigo anthologies. So I actually did start in comics with sequential art. I always wanted to really do covers, but I absolutely love comics anyway. So the chance to draw interiors was amazing. And I think I was pretty lucky to get, I did like 5 pages in Elephant Men 54 at the beginning with Richard Starkins. He offered me that. And then I think pretty much it was like straight into the Witching Hour, Vertigo anthology, possibly a Fables one. And then it was Supreme after that, Rob Liefeld. So I think it was just around the time that I was probably a couple of issues into Supreme that I maybe got my first cover. I'm trying to remember what it was, but I'm not too sure. I think it might have been some Dynamite stuff, or maybe like it was around the time of Swords of Sorrow with Gail Simone. And then since then, it's just been nuts. It's like, I mean, my way into comics is like a little strange and convoluted, and probably not dissimilar to yours, Jim. It's like always adoring comics from a young age. My dad used to buy me them from the market where we used to go, and I just adored them, and that's what I always wanted to do. But I never felt like I was good enough, so I was always kind of skirting around the side of actually doing what I wanted to do. So working in comic shops and being able to read and consume them, and then setting up the festival. And so I've always been around this stuff that I love. But I think just from creators getting to know me through Thought Bubble, when I did get a social media account and started posting stuff that I draw online, they were like, oh, you can draw? I remember like Becky emailing me saying, oh, you can draw, Lisa. And I was like, I like to draw for myself, but I don't think I'm very good. And I just started getting work straight away. It's not slowed down. And so it was interiors, comic covers, and then I was lucky enough to get some gigs with Mondo after that. So the movie posters have come very late in the day. I say late in the day, but I think I've only been doing this stuff for like 7 years in comics. I started at an older age, but I was doing like bits of freelance illustration before then. But yeah, now lucky enough to do some movie posters and lots of covers, and then this new series with Scott Snyder, Barnstormers, which is interiors as well. I'm back on that, which are hard. Interiors are hard, but I'm loving it.
So glad. Well, first off, let me apologize. I forgot about Al.
Please don't. I haven't done much of that all.
Early work. So, but I'm glad. Yeah, and I saw that big the Snyder announcement and all the stuff that's been happening with Substack. There's so many different interesting ways of publishing that are kind of coming around that I think is really exciting. So, last but not least, just to talk about the creating your own book, let's talk about Bill. Bill, how did Lucky Boy come about? And let me talk a little bit about your history and how you ended up making comics, basically.
Sure. So you want me to start with the comics or with Lucky Boy?
Let's start with comics, and then since Lucky Boy is the newest, we'll
sure.
Get to that.
Makes sense. Let me see. How can I think the only way for me to tell the story is if I date myself.
Well, I mean, like all of us are roughly 60 years old at this point. So
this is true. Well,
I think we've all dated ourselves already.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. I might get into specific years. I don't know, but yeah, I think it all started when I was a kid, like 11, 12 years old, and I loved comics. Comics, as far as I knew, were only found on newsstands. And there's just one day I was visiting my grandfather, and he had discovered a comic book store. And this is probably like, I don't know, 1986 or 1987. And it blew me away. Just the fact that there could be such a thing as a store that sells nothing but comic books. it was like the most amazing place I'd ever been to, you know, and that kind of changed everything. And I just discovered all of these like small publishers and independent comic books. And I think actually at this time, like I was really influenced by Eastman and Laird with Ninja Turtles, you know, because it wasn't a cartoon yet. You know, it was like this indie comic that they just wanted to make their own thing, you know, and get it into stores. And I don't know, I found that just so inspiring that I had never thought of that before, that somebody could just, you know, make something and put it out there, you know, and that I think was one of the biggest influences for me, just the fact that that can be something that can be done. And then, you know, that inspired me to go. I went to the Joe Kubert School of Cartoon and Graphic Art to you know, learn how to make comic books after I graduated high school, and it was good. I learned a lot there, but this was like I graduated in 1996, and by 1995, that's when the whole bottom fell out of the comic book industry. Marvel went bankrupt, and we were all kind of sweating bullets. How the heck are we going to work in this industry? You know, everybody in the school, and me and a couple of my friends, we just kind of happened upon a situation. One of our friends met a coordinator at an animation studio who needed cleanup artists, and we were like, well, there's not much work in comics. Maybe this summer we'll work, you know, at this animation place and see what happens. We need money. So we did cleanup for the summer, a few of us. And then after we graduated, I just wound up going back to the animation studio, and I just wound up working in animation, starting off doing like the lowest thing, which is like cleanup. And that's kind of where I discovered storyboarding, you know. And then like once I was starting to storyboard, I was like, oh, this is like, you know, this is scratching the same itch of visual storytelling of comics, of the thing that I loved. So I wound up becoming a story artist for most of my career. And really, comics I've only really done on the side. I've only had a couple, you know, creator-owned things, and that's really about it. But yeah.
Cool. And so then how did and then you just, with Lucky Boy, which is a full graphic novel, is that correct? Or is it
yeah, it's more like a bande dessinée. It's a French format. Yeah, I don't know. I've been really interested in French comics too for a while, and I've always seen this one as like in like a French format. So it's 80 pages total. French format. Actually, I'm going to show you that I got a preview copy right here. So that's what it looks like.
That's awesome. And those are hardcovers, right?
They're all hardcovers, as is this. But where was I going with this? Yeah, I've just been. This has been a side project of mine for, I hate to admit it, but for about 20 years almost. This book. I had done my other comic, Rex Steel Nazi Smasher, which started doing those in the late 90s. Did the last one in 2003, I think, and we published a collection in 2004, and then that got published in France as well in 2007, and then in Spain. This I've been working on. I got the idea for it in 2003 or 2002. I don't really remember exactly. And it's just been a side project that I've been very, very slowly working on. And I was hoping to get it done, I don't know, around 2013 or something, but then I had kids. And it just got a bit slower and took me even longer. But it's finally done. It's at the printer. The French one is out. It's been out since the summer. Yeah, I'm very close to that finish line.
Awesome. Congratulations. That's going to be, I'm sure, very, very extra satisfying when it finally is in your hands again and officially out where people can purchase it. So,
oh yeah, for sure.
Great work. So one of the things that obviously is a recurring theme here is creative freedom. And I think a lot of that sometimes you need to balance when you're working, whether it's, like Bill, you're working at Pixar, or Stefan, you're working with Marvel on What If, or, a lot of you are working Marvel DC. So we still have about 20 minutes left. So I just want to take a little time and just have each of you maybe chat a little bit about, because I think one of the things that we have from people who have come into the chat and just talking about is what this creative freedom allows, and balancing it with satisfying the kind of work that you're expected to do. And then if there's a little time left, we'll talk a little bit about just digital. Like the other question that's coming up is a lot of especially with the pandemic, people have been consuming a lot of everything digitally versus physically. And has that changed anything about the way you produce your work? So those are a couple themes I just wanted to touch on. And I'm really open to anybody grabbing the mic, as it were, and talking about that.
I can start. I can tell. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say,
what was the first question again?
The first question is just a little bit about how do you find the kind of joy of creative freedom inside of the box of like a corporate mandate. So if you're doing work for a big publisher, where do you find those little bits of joy that you can create something with characters that aren't yours, or that you have an editor who might not allow you to do certain things, and that's been something that a lot of people struggle with.
I was going to say, for obviously when you're working with established characters that have been around for many years and the fans already, excuse me, there's a canon that's established, and of course you have to keep building on what's already there, unless the mission is to kind of blow it up. But you're fitting within inside like a tradition, so you have to kind of respect it and build on that. And so I kind of feel like, for me, when I work on my own stuff, I mean, you always have the as artists, we all second guess ourselves, you know what I mean? But at least I'm second guessing myself. I'm never second guessing myself along the lines of, oh, is this okay? Is this allowed? Is this what they want? You know what I mean? So you're kind of free of that layer of second guessing. You're just down to, am I being true to my story and my characters? And just to give you a just very specific thing real quick, for Silver, for instance, it's, I'm not going to pitch it because I don't want to eat up your time, but it's a period story. It takes place in the 30s. It's kind of pulp adventure with conmen and vampires. And to me, it was very important that the story took place in the 30s in that kind of pulp environment, because there's a level of whimsy to the story that it brought the right kind of aesthetic distance that made it work, for Indiana Jones and stuff like that. But the notes I was getting from publisher, ironically, was like, no, let's make this like modern time because it'll be cheaper to make as a movie. I was just like, but that's wrong for the story. And I'm not precious. Like I've been working with studio, and so I know there's always another way of doing it, and I never have a problem changing anything if it's truer to the story or the characters or whatever. But I never want to do a change just cynically because it'll be cheaper to make, or it'll be blah, blah, blah. So I think just going, just being completely autonomous, with Dark Planet and Silver, and then the other ones after that, it's just like, it took away all that second guessing and all the notes that were given for the wrong reasons.
I was kind of hoping to hear from Joelle on this, because you've both written a legacy character at DC, but you've also created a brand new one. And so I was wondering what the differences in those experiences were, and kind of how you feel about it, and I guess which you prefer.
Well, that's a good question. I was working on Catwoman, and it was tricky because before that I only did Lady Killer, and I didn't have to answer to anybody. They just I just sent my pages to the editor. I don't think I even told him what the story was. And so I was really nervous, and I know that she was coming off like a really big event of leaving Batman at the altar. So it was like I was getting her in a bad place. It was really tricky for me to sort of navigate the waters, and I didn't really feel comfortable. But you know, I feel like I stumbled, like learning on the job. Basically, is thrown into the deep end. Okay, and I did it. And then with Wonder Girl, it was they just wanted to reboot something, and I got lucky, like right before the pandemic. And so I had like 3 months to just sit down and work on character and costume. And I didn't know if the book was going to get made at all for a while, but I had a blast of just like making shit up. And
That's awesome.
it did.
That's like not the typical experience though, right? Like it's very rare for an artist for creator to get 3 months to kind of work on that early stuff, right?
Yeah, that doesn't happen. Like, research, I got to read stuff about it instead of just like jumping in.
Yeah.
So I was really lucky with that. And I feel like my editor's really awesome. She kind of gently guides me in a direction, and I'm kind of chaotic. So she's a saint, because I have all these ideas and I just throw them on like a notebook that's just a mess. And then I scan it and send it to her, and I'm like, here's the story. It's way more fun to do my own characters. It's been interesting to work on like the Wonder Woman world, I guess. There's just so much out there. So it's intimidating.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think I had not that great of a time stretch like you, Joelle, but when we got tapped to relaunch Luke Cage and Iron Fist, Power Man and Iron Fist at the time, and we got to redesign his look, their looks. It was definitely kind of like a full circle kind of experience, because when I was a kid, that was the one character, not Black Panther, not even Falcon. That was the one character as a little black kid reading these comics. I saw him for some reason. He just fascinated me. The tiara and the yellow shirt, silk shirt. I mean, he was swagged out pretty much. And I was like, wow, this guy, and he's hanging with the Hulk and Captain America and so on and so forth. So I just kind of took to that character as a kid, and I was just fascinated by his look and read up on him and started collecting his comics. And so to get a chance to redevelop him in Iron Fist, and it happened right before the show. So some of the things that they did for the Luke Cage show, they incorporated into they got it from the comics that we did. So that was pretty cool to kind of see some of the visuals. They took those visuals. Someone shared this earlier about when you do something that you feel is authentic, it will connect with other people. And I think that's part of the reason why they were able to do that, because they felt like, oh, wow, this is something we can connect to. And that was my only thing, was I just want to be able to do something that felt like it came, from me, if that makes sense. Everyone wants to do that, right? But sometimes you kind of do it and you're under, other, factors of deadlines and things of that nature. But
did you feel like precious at all about putting like so much of your authentic self into something that is ultimately like a licensed property?
What's funny? It kind of benefited us when we went off to do Bitterroot, because there were things I wanted to do and they kind of pushed back on, and we just took those things and said, well, you know what, we'll just kind of reroute it and put this character or this idea in our stories. And thanks Marvel for turning us down like that. We're okay now.
Yeah, I think that's a really common experience, I feel, because I mean, obviously there are pretty big limitations on what can be done at these like massive corporations. And I think
Right.
like the editorial teams try to get as much of it in there as possible, but ultimately, you know, they have to answer to higher ups, and a lot of that stuff just never sees the light of day. So I'm glad you were able to do it in something creator owned.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, not surprisingly, not just with you, but with so many, is that that story is very common. I mean, technically, that's what you hear from a lot of the image guys from the founding, is that, you know, that entire company started because, I mean, there's a lot of other factors, of course, but you know, between recognition and pay. But at a certain point, it's like, you know, I'm just going to do this thing that I really want to do, instead of giving it to a big corporation. And then, you know, like you hear stories these days, you've got, like, you know, the people who've done things that have been turned into massive movies, and you hardly even get a credit. And that's, you know, it's problematic. So I'm really glad that everyone here has kind of taken their route and decided to do something that is on their own or of their own, because that is wholly yours and no one can change it for anything, which is amazing. So I'll ask one kind of last question as we wrap up, and that's been, you know, because we've covered the kind of creator-owned space very well, but just talking about where we're at in production. So I think comic book creators by nature are already very sequestered. Everyone's at home doing their thing. So with the pandemic, has that changed anything about the way you've done work that has been significant for you versus how it was even just a couple of years ago, aside from, unfortunately, the loss of conventions for a lot of us, you know, because here we are. I'll start with Lisa, actually, which is perfect because of, you know, the balance of work and conventions.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a tough year for so many people, hasn't it? Just across the board, but events and hospitality in particular has really taken a hit. And you know, Thought Bubble's gotten through it pretty well so far with the Arts Council, but you know, at the beginning there was a lot of funding to keep it going, and now we're kind of coming to the end where it's like where I think people will really start to struggle. So that's been tough, and obviously personally from my art career, it's great. You know, a lot of us are very solitary people. I work in a very small room. I don't get to see anyone. Sometimes I'll have days where I feel like I don't talk. So getting to a convention and just kind of meeting colleagues is really important. It's, you know, it's good for your mental health. It's just a great thing to do. So it has been strange in terms of how work has carried on through the pandemic. I think, you know, with the freelance art and writing community, it's kind of nothing's probably changed too much for us. We work alone. A lot of us work at home or in studios that we're in charge of. So if anything, I think because of the home entertainment market, that's kind of really ramped up. So because I have one foot in kind of movie and TV promotion too, it's that's become very, very busy. And so, you know, various jobs with Netflix and other studios has really kind of it's been great. And I feel like the last year I've been busier than any other time, really. So I feel very lucky and blessed for that. And I really feel for people that haven't been as fortunate as me as well. It's I hope things get back to normal soon for everyone, especially the people that have been struggling.
Just want to say, sorry, go ahead, Stephen.
No, I think Stephen, you're probably going to share something similar to what I was going to share about animation.
Yeah, that's not where I was going, but go ahead.
Oh, well, for me, it's a lot of what Tula shared. It's you know, more the same, but also I I do a lot of character design work for animation, and so in the past, a lot of times it would be, you have to be on location or on site or what have you, and now that's completely all,
True.
like this is all virtual, it's all online. And honestly, I had a conversation with a major studio yesterday, and this goes for video game work as well. Had a conversation with the director yesterday, and they're thinking about this completely going digital, not completely, but just enough to where that's the majority of the time, because so much of the overhead is completely eliminated. You don't have all those other issues. The only kind of factor is that immediate feedback at times, maybe, but even now with technology, like how it is, you literally can do, I mean, we're seeing it here at this convention. There's folks are able to get online and draw on the same board together. So, technologies like that is being implemented into these workspaces. So that's the biggest thing for me over so I haven't really missed a beat. I've been more busy now than I've ever been, prior.
Yeah, there's definitely some technological solutions that have come online, to facilitate like the last couple of years that I hope we kind of keep. And whenever, things go back to more of a normal setting. But, the thing that I am really worried about for me is for younger artists, because I've been at this for a long time, but, like when I was younger, everything that I learned it working in a studio with somebody else, like watching over the shoulder of somebody else, either doing their work or correcting my drawings or watching an art director do their color stuff and so on and so forth. And now, without that experience, it would not have been the same, learning curve for me. So I just, that's my only concern. I just hope that younger artists for this generation, as they're starting their career and they're at the point where what you want to do is being exposed to as many other artists and kind of learn from everybody, which you do your whole life, by the way, but there's years where it's more critical. I just hope that experience comes back,
So Bill, can you speak a little bit about that as well? Like, I feel like the last couple of films I've seen, everyone, it's like, done in my pajamas at home, and so, having gone from Pixar, I assume that you are also part of that, working from home for sure. Most of these last films.
Yeah, I came, actually, when I took over head of story on Turning Red from the original person who had to leave for personal reasons, but when I came on, I was in my new role for about a week, and then that's when the lockdown happened, and then I did the entire run of show from home, which was crazy because I had souped before. I had souped on Venture Brothers, but this is the first time I had ever souped for Pixar. And it was, it was like really scary because like, this is how it's going to be. And now that I've done it, this is really the only way I know how to do this job is from home, like this particular like souping job. I'm sure once we go back to the studio, I'm sure it'll start making sense. But it's just a really weird situation for me because I just started a brand new position right at the same exact time, I'm hoping that there'll be, like a balance in the future. Even like before COVID hit, I was one of those people that like, can't we just work at home like 1-2 days a week if the timing works out, Like I'd always wanted that balance, and like it just went from all in the studio all the time to like all at home all the time. And I'm hoping like the good thing that may come out of this is there'll be a new world where we actually get that balance, and get the positives of both. Because I know what Stefan is talking about, because I had the same experience of that where I just learned just so much on on those jobs. You know, like I wouldn't have be in the same place, I think, without having learned those experiences like that. But hopefully, yeah, there'll be a balance. We can get that and some sanity at home as well. You know?
Totally. Well, I think that's really where we're at these days. Is, I mean, even for us looking at this event, you know, next year we're hoping to do it in person. We think, you know, fingers crossed by October of 2022, we should be, you know, in a spot where we could actually get together. But then at the same time, you know, we serve such a international audience doing it online that we're like, well, I wonder if there's some kind of balance that we could strike where, you know, we didn't have much of an online portion to this previously, but it's been so satisfying to see people from around the world be able to interact with, you know, people who are never gonna, I wouldn't say never, but essentially are like, they're never gonna want to come all the way out to Los Angeles and take all of those expenses to come to Pasadena to do this convention. So what is it that you can offer those people who can benefit from all the things that we're doing on these panels and these conversations and be able to still spread that throughout the world? And so I think you're very right in that we're all looking at what the future holds as this combination of in-person and online, and kind of where that great balance is.
And I think in your, as far as your convention, and you know, you're part of the few kind of type of events who are so focused on education, and that's amazing. That's, you know, that's wonderful. The thing, but I was going to say earlier, Sanford, is the thing, and kind of what Lisa, you were saying, is the thing I'm missing the most from the convention is that, I mean, I used to do, there was a time where I was doing like 10, 15 big ones a year, you know, with Dark Planets and stuff like that. And so maybe I spoke one-on-one with 150,000 people. I don't know, you know what I mean? And all across the country, in blue state, red state, purple state, you know, and I never felt like we were divided. And I'm sure that half the people that I was talking to had completely different views than I have on everything. But when we talked about story, when we talked about this character, you know, then we were connecting on the human connection of it. And as long as we do that, then we don't shoot at each other. You know what I mean? And like this feeling of, hey man, we're not that, you know, the important stuff we actually agree on. Let's just talk about story where we can project those emotions into. And that's the thing personally I'm missing the most. Awesome. Well, that's a kind of a great way to wrap it up. Like I do hope that we do get more human connection. I love seeing everybody, and it's great to catch up, but also everyone's in, you know, little boxes. And I hope that, you know, I'm a hugger, so I really would like to do that again in the future. So we'll hug you next year. That's right. That's right. All right. Well, listen, thank you everyone so much for taking your time to hang out with us here at Lightbox. I mean, I super appreciate it. I love seeing you all, and I miss seeing you all in person. I do hope that that happens again sooner rather than later. Anyway, so thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Thank you, Jim.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.